6 years ago, the Honda Corporation decided to create a whole new sport. It took the three-wheel motorcycle known as an all-terrain vehicle, or ATV, which had been around since 1970 as a farm and utility vehicle, and spent tens of millions of dollars to market it as a plaything the whole family could use out in the woods, on dirt roads, and in the desert, away from the hustle and bustle of street traffic. In just 5 years, the four leading motorcycle manufacturers, all Japanese, sold 2.5 million of them in this country alone. The trouble is that during an ATV's average lifespan of 7 years, there is a 1 in 3 chance that the ATV will carry its rider to serious injury or death. That, according to the Consumer Product Safety Commission. Government experts say it is by far the most dangerous vehicle on the market today.
It's my lucky day.
These early ATV commercials made them look like safe family fun with thrills and chills for good measure. In this commercial, children fly through the air on machines that can go 40 miles an hour. In this one, a man becomes a better father to his son by getting him an ATV.
Since we started riding, I've realized something. Kelly doesn't know much about the generation gap. And neither do I.
That's what hooked Fred Cooperstein, a chance to get even closer to his two sons, who were 9 and 11 years old.
I was fooled, and I think intentionally so, by Honda. The ATC was sold as a family toy. What they ought to do is require them to put a big sticker right down on the gas tank where you can't miss it, with a big skull and crossbones in black. It's very vivid. It says, "This machine may kill your son."
Cooperstein taught his sons how to ride the ATV, and he taught safety, insisting they wear helmets for protection and that they ride at a slow speed. It wasn't enough for his son David.
He wasn't drinking. He wasn't going fast. He was probably within 300 yards of where I was standing when it happened. And that machine turned upside down and pounded him on his head. It did it.
Cooperstein put David in his pickup truck and rushed him to the hospital.
We got there in about 10 minutes and brought him in the emergency room. And about an hour later, they came out and told us that he was gone. And I don't care what Honda says, that Honda killed him.
The type of accident that killed David Cooperstein is all too common. Based on a 1985 survey by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, in that year alone, ATVs flipped over and landed on riders about 22,000 times. Randy Nelson is a motorcycle expert who has testified against ATV makers in court.
In terms of dangerous products, how does this compare with other things you've seen?
The three-wheel configuration is by far the most dangerous.
Nelson made this slow-motion film on a course he set up to demonstrate just how easily ATVs flip over. To keep one of them upright, the rider must carefully shift his weight to compensate for sudden lurches by the machine. But watch what happens when Nelson, traveling at 18 miles an hour, hits 2 small mounds on a level track. The bumps throw him off balance. There's no mechanical suspension to absorb the jolt, and he can't shift his weight enough to prevent this 300-pound ATV from flipping over on his back. This won't happen every time, but it can happen at any time. Honda, which sells about 70% of all ATVs, refused to be interviewed. They suggested we speak with Alan Isley, who represents the entire ATV industry.
Well, what I'm saying is, in the 17 years that this product has been in use in this country, that 99% of the people who are using this product are not being involved in injuries.
In this country, we've got every year 350 to 400 million people who fly in airplanes. What do you think the reaction would be if 1% of those were injured or killed?
The reaction would be to ask either the industry or the government or the users of that product to induce a safety program to improve that record, and that's exactly what we're doing.
If you had 1% every year in airplane accidents, they'd close these airports. That's what they do. They'd ground these planes until they found out what was wrong with them.
According to the Consumer Product Safety Commission, 1 of every 20 ATVs is involved in death or injury each year. and children are victims more often than adults. This 14-year-old girl is one of about 1,600 riders injured seriously enough each week to be admitted to emergency rooms. She survived a head injury, but in the past 5 years, more than 600 riders, nearly half of them children, have died in ATV accidents. The list of lawsuits against ATV makers now exceeds 500. One of them was filed by the mother of Wendy Molitor. Wendy was 9 years old when she hopped on the back of an ATV.
And while riding, they made a turn. And when they turned, the ATC flipped over. And it landed on Wendy, and it broke her neck.
And if things go wrong...
Wendy Molitor is now a respirator-dependent quadriplegic. In order to avoid a jury trial in her case, Honda agreed to pay $5.7 million. Craig McClellan is Wendy's attorney.
I think that the Honda manufacturer, in our case, was very concerned about having a jury tell it that it's responsible for the lifeless, crippled bodies of the children that are strewn across the off-road areas of this country.
The ATV industry has always insisted the machines are perfectly safe. It is the riders, the industry says, who too often are not. In fact, many riders do misuse ATVs. There are those who drink.
This is safety at its best.
Riders who drive beyond their ability. And riders who carry passengers. This man's wife, by the way, is pregnant. But 2 years ago, the Consumer Product Safety Commission began a study to determine if most accidents were caused by driver misuse or by the machine itself. Ann Graham was appointed to that commission by President Reagan.
We've found that under normal circumstances, these machines tip over. It's a case of normal and foreseeable use, not misuse.
Not misuse.
Not misuse.
But it's safe to say that what you're saying is that the machine itself is
not stable. It has particularly with the three-wheelers, they have a high tendency to tip over. When they tip over, they can easily tip over on the rider.
We asked Alan Isley of the ATV industry about the study made by the Consumer Product Safety Commission.
The injury information that they have gathered in the last 2 years has shown that there is a large degree of misuse of the product, of use with alcohol, of use by children on adult machines, of use on public roads, or use with passengers.
You think in most of these cases, the injuries are the result of misuse by the person riding the machine?
That has been the majority of evidence that has been gained in a 2-year study by the CPSC.
I don't know how they come to that conclusion. It simply isn't the case.
The data you have does not support that conclusion?
No, it doesn't.
Experts say the most dangerous thing about the three-wheel ATV is turning it. It's not enough just to turn the handlebars. The rider has to shift his body weight and tilt the machine off balance. It's a risky maneuver, especially on bumpy, uncertain terrain. And even at slow speeds, many grown-ups and children never master it. Congressman Doug Barnard is chairman of the House Consumer Affairs Subcommittee, which has demanded a recall and a ban on ATV production.
Isn't that a drastic measure?
It's not drastic when you consider the record. When you look at the record of deaths that came about because of the malfunction of the Pinto, only 90 people died. There's been 600 people die from this particular equipment. If you take all of the other products that have been recalled from the marketplace, none of them have the record that this vehicle does.
This is a product that was marketed for kids. It is to be used by kids. Did they test them to see if they were safe for kids to be used?
We have no record that they did. We have no record that they really tested the marketplace, that they took kids and put them on these vehicles to see how competent they were in the operation of them. We have no examples of that at all.
During the Christmas season 5 years ago, Jeff and Janet Vance of Gatlinburg, Tennessee, who are suing Honda, bought ATVs for their sons. The boys had to study the instructions in the owner's manual and pass a quiz before the Vances would let them ride. Nonetheless, their son Bob lost control of his ATV. Some days later, it was discovered he had suffered a ruptured pancreas.
He was in unbelievable pain. And, you know, they strongly indicated to us that he wouldn't live. And then the doctors, after they did surgery, the surgeon came out and he said, "We have literally named him the miracle child."
And all of this as a result of something that you bought because you thought it was
totally safe.
Before they bought the machines, the Vances say they questioned the Honda dealer carefully about the ATV's safety record.
What kind of questions did you ask him?
I asked him specifically, had they heard of any injuries on ATCs? And he said no, that they had not heard of any, and they had sold a lot of them.
What do you say to the people who make these things?
To me, the minute that they knew they were unsafe, I cannot believe, especially when it involved children, that they didn't pull it off right away and say, "We made a mistake."
Under pressure from Congress, the industry did tone down advertising directed at children. It added a fourth wheel on some models for greater stability and agreed to warn customers that adult-sized ATVs should not be used by anyone under 14, and also to warn against one of the most dangerous of all abuses, riding double. How well is the new warning system really working? We went to a Honda dealer in Yuma, Arizona, near where we'd been filming. We hid the camera across the street as motorcycle expert Randy Nelson, wearing a concealed microphone, asked the salesman about an ATV for his 9-year-old twin sons. Without hesitation, the salesman recommended an adult-sized ATV for the boys.
And right now, their size, this vehicle is just right. Or if these guys really, you think they're really going to get good at it and they really like it, well, maybe you go to the 200.
Oh, I see.
Still a 4-stroke.
What's the biggest, the one that you think that they'd be okay on?
From here.
250?
Yeah.
I see, okay.
Then Nelson asked the salesman if the boys could ride double, contrary to the warning label.
I see this says no passengers. Can these guys ride together or no? It's okay?
They all say that. Now, big guys like this now are big enough to carry you and two adults.
Yeah, they're almost 10, so
but they're recommended for one for safety purposes.
Okay.
But you can ride two.
Okay.
We showed the footage to Congressman Barnard.
That's the most irresponsible example of advertising, of selling, I've ever seen. And it violates every assurance that the manufacturers and makers made to us as far as emphasizing the safety. They have done nothing to stymie the sale of those vehicles to people who are not competent to operate them.
Let me tell you what a dealer said to a potential customer who asked, "Can these two kids ride double?" "Yes." Is that okay?
No, in fact, that seems to be terribly irresponsible on the part of the dealer.
I see this says no passengers.
This parent says, "Can these two boys ride together?" "Yeah, it's okay, don't worry about it." "Can these 9-year-olds ride at 250? "Yeah, it's okay, don't worry about it." That's your dealer. What's his responsibility?
That dealer was not fulfilling his responsibility. He was not using the materials we have provided. He was not using good common sense.
And why does the dealer tell him that?
I don't know why dealers tell him that. That seems terribly irresponsible to me.
Then that says you've got some irresponsible dealers.
In my experience, every time the manufacturer finds a measure of irresponsibility taking place at the dealerships, they will take remedial action.
Are you aware of any cases where the manufacturer has pulled the franchise from a dealer?
I wouldn't normally be aware of that, but there may be such cases. I do know the manufacturers have put forth a very strong position on this to their dealers, but I'm not aware of the enforcement practices of the manufacturers.
You're not aware of even a single case where a dealer had his franchise pulled because he ignored the instructions of the manufacturer?
I'm not personally aware of any.
Do you think one exists?
I don't know.
This industry, for the most part, has not demonstrated any interest in regulating themselves on a voluntary basis. I feel the industry hasn't been honest with the American public. They've gone out to promote and sell these ATVs and not adequately warn the consumer of the problem.
The industry disputes that. 2 years ago, it set up training programs to teach new riders how to use ATVs. Remember, the industry says the problem is with the rider, not the machine.
Their training program has reached approximately 5,000 of the ATV riders. There are over 5 million riders in this country, and the number's growing. That's less than 0.1%, and that's a figure that I would not look to with any pride.
If it's so important to have a safety course, why don't you require anyone who's buying an ATC, take this course. This is for your good. Take this course right here before you buy it.
I think that's the most responsible approach we can take, and the industry is looking into that at this time.
Could maybe that have saved one life?
Yes, and we
is
are
that
committed.
Important enough?
It is important to us.
Then why don't you do it?
As I say, is under consideration at this time. See, you seem to look for one simple solution to a very complex problem that is encompassing thousands of people in many different environments. We have to have a multiple approach to this. We have to have state laws. We have to have education available in many, many forms. Written, audiovisual, personal training. We're addressing every one of those factors.
And I'm looking at one that you can address today. The manufacturers can say today, we are concerned enough about this problem that we are going to take it upon ourselves to say that before you walk out of our showroom with this machine, you're going to take a lesson. You're going to take this course, or we won't sell it to you because we care that much about your life. Can you do that?
Yes, we could do that.
The Consumer Product Safety Commission isn't waiting around for that to happen. Having just determined that ATVs pose an imminent hazard to public safety, the Commission will soon go to court to force the manufacturers to recall all three-wheel ATVs and all four-wheel ATVs which are used by children under 16. The total cost of the recall could exceed $1 billion.